Happy Thursday, everybody. Thanks for hopping on to this video. I'm going to try to make it brief, explain the assignment, and let you guys get to it. So Thursday is the stories we tell ourselves. So first, going to read that. Going to complete the questions on the Google form like usual. You're going to view the image. I feel most colored when, that's here. And then you're going to try to draw some connections between that reading. Between the reading and the image, and you will post your thoughts on the Padlet, which I will show you how to do. So we'll start with the reading. Stories we tell ourselves. Sociologist Dalton Conley reflects on how the ways in which society teaches us to organize our reality can affect our identities. So before we get started, almost forgot, let's look at some essential questions to be thinking about for today. So first, what are stereotypes? How do they affect how we see ourselves and how others see us? And how does our need to belong influence our identity? How does it lead to the formation of in-groups and out-groups in our society? So again, who fits in, who's the outsiders? All right, I'm not your typical middle-class white male. I am middle class, despite the fact that my parents had no money. I am white, but I grew up in an inner-city housing project where most everyone was black or Hispanic. I enjoyed a range of privileges that were denied my neighbors, but that most Americans take for granted. In fact, my childhood was like a social science experiment. Find out what being middle class really means by raising a kid from a so-called good family in a so-called bad neighborhood. Define whiteness by putting a light-skinned kid in the midst of a community of color. If the exception proves the rule, I'm the exception. I'm that exception. Ask any African American to list the adjectives that describe them, and they will likely put black or African American at the top of the list. Ask someone of European descent the same question, and white will be far down the list, if it's there at all. Not so for me. I've studied whiteness the way I would a foreign language. I know its grammar, its parts of speech. I know the subtleties of its idioms, its vernacular words and phrases to which the native speaker has never given a second thought. There's an old saying that you never really know your own language until you study another. It's the same with race and class. So I want to stop there for a minute. As I've said before, To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the major things it's going to deal with is racism. It's set in the 1930s in Macomb, Alabama, where segregation is happening. And so your race determines much about your identity and much about how your life will be. And so this sociologist is bringing an important piece of information up, right? He's saying if you're African American, if you're black, that's something that you're very cognizant of. If you had to write a list describing themselves, that would be at the top. But if you're white, it would probably be towards the bottom if you even listed it all, because white is kind of viewed as the default. If you're talking about a person, people automatically assume the person is white, unless you say a black person, right? And so that's what the sociologist is bringing about here, that you never really know your own language until you study another, just like race and class. So if you aren't studying another race or another class, you just kind of think of your own race or your own class as the default. All right. In fact, race and class are nothing more than a set of stories we tell ourselves to get through the world, to organize our reality. One of my mother's favorite stories was how I wanted a baby sister so badly that I kidnapped a black child in the playground of the housing complex. She told this story each time my real sister, Alexandra, and I were standing, arms crossed, facing away from each other over some squabble or fist fight. The moral of the story for my mother was that I should love my sister, since I had wanted to have her so desperately. The message I took away, however, was one of race. I was fascinated that I could have been oblivious to something that years later feels so natural, so innate, as race does. All right, and connection questions. Before we go to the connection questions, I want to bring up what he's talking about here. He's saying, I got a different message from that story than my mom did. His mom's message was, you wanted a daughter, or not a daughter, you wanted a sister so badly, you tried to steal one from the playground. But what our writer here is realizing is that race, as a kid, he didn't even really think about it. He said, I was so fascinated that I could have been so oblivious to something as race. He didn't see that girl as a little black girl. He just saw a little girl and wanted a sister, right? And so he's saying I was oblivious to this until much later, because now race feels so innate and so natural in our society. All right, so connection questions. Again, your name. What does Conley say about the difference between how black and white people describe themselves, and why do you think he believes that? Do you agree? Why or why not? Make a list of the adjectives that describe you. Which do you think of first? Which took longer to think of? Why were you able to think of some adjectives more easily than others? And then what does Conley mean when he says that race and class are nothing more than a set of stories we tell ourselves to get through the world? And then do you agree? So that's the connection questions. And then one last thing, you're going to click on this image and analyze it. So you can see that it says, I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a sharp white background. I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a sharp white background, and it repeats that over and over and over. So once you have kind of really thought about that image, you've thought about this text, you're going to draw connections between the two, and you're going to post your thoughts on the Padlet. So you'll click on this link. Padlet is something we'll use semi-frequently, and essentially what it is, it's just like a discussion board. So you're going to make connections between the stories we tell ourselves and I feel most colored when. And so I didn't give you really any clear directions on Google Classroom. So if you want to use these questions to kind of guide your response, you can. Or if you made some connection in your head that isn't really reflected in one of these questions, and that's okay too. I just want to see how you were kind of comparing and relating these two things. So some questions to consider. How does the way that we blend in or stand out among those around us change how we define ourselves? How does it change how others define us? How does it feel to be the different one, and how does it influence the choices we make? And is our identity influenced more greatly by our similarities to other people or by our differences? And I think that my recording is blocking. So let me see if I can get rid of me. Nope, that's not what I needed. Okay, I don't think you can see it because my face is in the corner here. But on Padlet, there is a little plus sign in the corner, the right-hand bottom corner of the screen, and that's how you type your post. So you'll click that plus sign, you will type whatever it is you're thinking, and then you don't even have to click upload or submit or anything. It'll automatically go onto the Padlet. And then if you look at the directions, reply to at least 2 classmates' posts. So, if you see something that you agree with or something that maybe provoked another thought in you or something that maybe you disagreed with, comment on 2 other people's posts, share your thoughts, but make sure you were respectful. Make sure you are using kind language at all times. And so that is the last of the assignment for Thursday. If you have any questions, as always, email me. I'll help you any way that I can.